ready to come back. It's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, who is the author of the book whose cover you see right here, Magnificent Trees of Indiana. Please join me in welcoming Carroll Ritter.
I was going to say, I'm probably not going to talk on mic. I'll just talk to you personally right from the floor here, if everybody can hear me okay. I was going to thank Rowena for inviting me, but I see we have two Rowenas here, so I have to thank them both for inviting me tonight. And it's a pleasure to be here. I am a Lawrence County native, born and raised here in Bedford, and still live in Lawrence County. I have been around the country, almost every state, and done a lot of exploration, hiking, backpacking. But my primary love always has been from youth, trees. My father took me to the woods very early in life. He taught me about the trees and how to identify trees. And it ended up that my very first little science project for elementary school was tree bark. And with the help of my father, I identified a lot of those species in our local Lawrence County woods. That science fair project got me a blue ribbon. So from there, I just moved forward until the last 4 years have been very arduous in doing a project that I had wanted to do for a long time and was encouraged to do so. And that was create a book on Indiana trees. Now, I did not want to approach this like many other guidebooks on Indiana trees that are already out there. How to identify by bark and twig and bud and leaf and so on, many of which have Latin terms and a lot of technological or technical detail in them. I wanted to create something different and new that had never been done in Indiana before as far as a tree book. And therefore, I came up with some ideas to incorporate things that I thought were rather novel and unique. Hence, the product was produced after 4 years, and I bring this to you after about 1,900 miles of travel, all in Indiana. Indiana is not a huge state, but yet you can cover a lot of ground in Indiana if you're going north to south to east to west and back and forth across the state. So I was able then to put all of this together into a book called Magnificent Trees of Indiana. And the cover photograph is one I took. And of course, most all of the book's 275 color photographs were taken by me. There were a few taken by another wonderful Lawrence County and Bedford boy with whom I grew up, Gary Potts. And some of you may know Gary or his father Wayne, who used to be the Farm Bureau rep here in town. And Gary is a professional photographer also, and he was able to take a few shots for me that I was not able to get to, or I used a few of his that he had previously taken because they were so beautiful. So if we can dial down the lights a little bit more, we'll see if we can proceed here.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I want you to be able to see the very best possible. The organization of the book was the first primary thing to accomplish. As I said, I did not want to create or recreate something that had been done before in same old format. And there are several good, wonderful books on Indiana trees, yes, but I wanted to do something a little different. So I've incorporated several things together in this book. First, Indiana's history is, of course, what we're all about here tonight, too. Oh, come on in, that's fine, I'll take a break. We are interested in Indiana's history here, or we wouldn't be here tonight. And Indiana has a remarkable and marvelous history, especially in the pioneer life and settlements that incorporated or the large trees into their lifestyle. The second thing I wanted to include in this book was the physiography of Indiana, the lay of the land, how this influences tree types, how it influences species, how it influenced the early settlers who arrived in Indiana. Third thing I wanted to do was talk about biological interrelationships and incorporate with it a new subject, a topic that needs to be addressed, and that is climate change. And so I wanted to talk about the biology of trees, their role in the environment, and then proceed to this day and age when climate is of concern and how trees actually mitigate climate change and can help that. The next thing I wanted to do was the big primary focus of the book. That was to talk about the champion trees of Indiana, the big trees, the state record-holding trees in this marvelous state, from all kinds of different species. We have a big tree registry in this state published through the Department of Natural Resources, and I went to that list of all the state champions and where they were located. My objective then was to run these down and find these things, photograph them, and talk about them in the book. Those that were still living, some of which I found had died. And as big old trees do, like us, we finally end our lives. And some of these trees had succumbed, and they were not there. And therefore, I substituted other really marvelous specimens for that tree in the book. The next thing I wanted to cover was something else that had not been incorporated in a book along with the trees. That was the old growth forests that still are in Indiana. Pieces, parcels of those places that the settlers would have first encountered. The big old forest, the haunting, daunting forest of 200 years ago. And I wanted to find these places that still existed and take special pictures of them too. The next thing I wanted to incorporate in the book was the beauty of trees. People are most attracted to the absolute beauty of trees through all seasons. We're now entering that magic season of spring when some of these trees will burst forward with spectacular beauty that we appreciate so much. The next thing I wanted to do was something that had not been done in tree books that I had ever seen. That was go visit and find some unique and odd trees, funny shapes, swollen trunks, odd looking trees. Why were they this way? What caused that in trees? Or what about dwarf trees, hybridization in trees? I wanted to kind of find out and get into that and take pictures of those specimens. The next thing was to kind of start wrapping up the book with talking about organizations that help protect our trees, that manage our forests, that keep our trees in perpetuity for us. And so I had a chapter on that. A very important thing about trees that a lot of books don't really address too much is how the trees affect people. We use trees for so many different purposes. We love trees for so many different purposes. And our children need to be brought up to appreciate and love trees too. And so this chapter concentrates on how people interact with trees. See if this goes forward. There she goes. A long time ago, Indiana did not look like it does today, obviously. When the settlers first moved here, it did not look like Bedford, Indiana at all. There was no Bedford, Indiana. In fact, how far back in history do we want to go before we can actually merge into prehistory? And there is a long lineage of both people in Indiana and the prehistoric peoples that first settled Indiana. We inherited that land from them, and therefore they were the forerunners of today's civilizations that we call civilizations. Sometimes you wonder on the news if we still have that or not. But if you had come here on horseback or in a wagon a long time ago, back in the 1700s and 1800s, the land, of course, was virgin timber, a lot of different types of trees, huge, big old trees, continuous forest cover for as far as you could imagine across this wonderful state. If you look at the left picture, it shows the tree types that probably were here in the 1800s, early 1800s, most likely. The southern Indiana, where we reside now, had mostly oak hickory and then beech maple. And in northern Indiana, we had some oak, of course, up there and a lot of beech maple terrain. Northern Indiana has a little different situation that I encountered when I did photography too. We have barrens and prairies and open country. We have dunes, swales, fens, bogs, and all kinds of different terrain up there. That makes the tree types different than we have down here. The big thing here in the karst area of southern Indiana is that there are a lot of caves and sinkholes. Excuse me. Maybe just a little drink. This weather is kind of starting to get to me a little bit. It's better now too. So that influenced a lot of trees too in the southern Indiana where you have karst terrain. On the right side of the picture is the current forest cover and how it really affects the landscape today. And we have, as you can see, much less forest. Although we are regaining forest, thank you, Rena. We're regaining forest, but still there's a lot that's been developed and industrialized. And so it's really coming back to some degree. The main part of the forest that's preserved now in southern Indiana is part of the Hoosier National Forest. And thanks to them, we do retain a lot of forest cover. That, between them and the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, parks and recreation areas. When people first encountered the big trees, are like the photograph on the left. This gentleman took pictures in Indiana back way in the 1800s. His name was Robert Ridgeway. He was an eminent naturalist, and he recorded many, many trees of early Indiana. And he's standing by a large, or he or one of his companions is standing by a large shoe-marred oak down in southwestern Indiana. And trees like this don't exist very much anymore. Only in a few places are they left. The picture on the right is Spring Mill State Park. They have their own sawmill platform, what they call a carriage, and they still recreate how things were done in the early days. And so I rephotographed the mill being run down here in Spring Mill State Park. So that's very close to us. Then we talked a little bit earlier here when I said I was focusing on interrelationships that talked about the biology. I don't know why that moved forward. The biota on trees, the fungi, the root systems, and all of this are extremely important, not only to the tree itself, but the underground system that links trees, that connects trees, from everything from the mycorrhizal fungi to the small root systems that intertwine. These all affect how trees grow, how they respond. And so I wanted to concentrate on that. Then we went into some of these champion tree locations. And as you can imagine, out of all 275 pictures. I had to choose just a few tonight to kind of intrigue you. In case you want to get the book, you'll see the rest of them. But the biggest bur oak tree, a lot of people have never heard of a bur oak tree, but it's one of the oak species, and it can be an extremely dominating, large specimen. The one on the left over there is in Posey County, down near Mount Vernon and New Harmony area, and it's the national champion. It's the biggest one in the nation. It happens to be an Indiana tree.
You mean that's the biggest tree or the biggest tulip tree?
The biggest bur oak, Rowena.
You're still on the first one. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still on the first one over here.
Is that the biggest one in the country or the biggest one in Indiana?
Both.
The biggest one in the country.
In the whole country, too. It's the Indiana champion. It's the biggest in the country. As far as I can stretch my arms apart, it's that big across.
How old do you think it is?
That one there, I think they've estimated it at approximately 450 years. So a little older than us. We're gaining on it, but we're not quite there yet. Who knows anything about the tulip tree? Tell me a fact.
I've been there.
You've been to the tulip tree?
Yeah.
Okay. Who knows something else about the tulip tree?
It's our state tree.
It's our state tree. This is the biggest one. The giant old thing, isn't it, Dave?
That's beautiful.
It's a big old beautiful thing. It's got a lot of character. In fact, I visited a lot of these trees and I said, my gosh, that's got a lot of character to it. And so you can obviously see, well, boy, that's for sure. And the folks there, this was on private property. They were thrilled to death to have their tree photographed for this book. So they were happy and I was happy too.
How did you know about it?
It was on the big tree registry already. And one person that helped me immensely with that was Janet Egger. She's our district forester. And Janet may have presented here before too on something. Janet and I have been good friends for a long, long period of time. And she helped me because she had been in charge of this big tree registry and she had all the data on it and the spreadsheets and stuff on all these trees. And I said, hey, I've got to get that list from you because I've got to find all these. And so I was able to do that. This tree over on the right is a southern red oak. Now people have heard of oaks. To a lot of people, oak is just an oak. There are a lot of oaks. And this one is the state champion southern red oak in Vanderburgh County, north of Evansville. He was a really beautiful tree. He or she, well, either one you want to go with. It was a beautiful tree. And I took several pictures of that one.
You said was. Is it no longer there?
Oh, it's still there. Yeah. It better be.
Look at that. Oh, isn't that gorgeous?
First time I approached this tree and got closer and closer to the thing, it was almost brought tears because it was so stunningly magnificent on its own. It was the owner of all the land there because look at its power of beauty. And so the swamp chestnut oak, and once again, there's another species. A lot of people, I've never heard of a swamp chestnut oak. They do grow in southern Indiana, a lot of different places. Some in swampy wetland areas, that's their preference. But others in just regular, what we would call regular farm ground. This was surrounded by farms, and the folks there were very generous in letting me do all the photography of this tree that I wanted. So,
Can you tell us where in Jones County that is?
it is, if you go to North Vernon and go down, I think it's Highway 3. It's down there, not too far from it. I think it's Uniontown, somewhere down in there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do all oak trees have acorns?
Yeah,
So that one has acorns also?
yeah, we collected some too.
Okay.
Planted some back at the house, and I had one survivor. He's still in a little cage to protect him from deer, but I do have a swamp chestnut from this state champion tree. And it's growing. It's growing. Got
Carroll, this advanced one, you may want to go back. There was one in Owens county, they didn't get to talk
Whoa,
about
did it advance too much? I'm glad you're watching.
I like this one.
Okay. As we know, sugar maple is one of the ones that are our most favorite. This sugar maple's in a cemetery, as you can obviously see here, but it stands guardian over this cemetery. It's near Gosport. So if you go out 46 towards Brown County State Park, or towards McCormick's, you can get off the highway and go towards Gosport, and this big tree is up there. It's the new state champion. It was submitted this past year. The new directory or registry should be coming out this coming year, and this one was submitted. So I went up there to see it.
How often does a new registry come out?
5 years.
That's you could sell pictures of that. It's beautiful. That's gorgeous.
He is.
Yeah.
You might make more money selling photographs.
And Rowena, they're not $1 or $2 books. They cost some money.
So wonderful.
If you like pecans, which we do, we all do, don't we? Pecan trees grow in Indiana. A lot of people think, oh, Georgia or down south, is where pecans grow. We do have some in southern Indiana. In fact, they can be planted across Indiana. And there is a pecan tree in a yard in Mitchell, Indiana, which was planted, obviously. But this guy's a natural one here. And he was very close to the Ohio River. It's in Vanderburgh County, south of Evansville. And there were many, many pecan trees in this general area here. This was the biggest one. And a friend of mine who's posing by the tree, Sean Dickerson, is the urban forester for the city of Evansville. And Sean took me around, my wife and me. I should give much credit to her because she accompanied me on all these adventures. She helped edit the book. She helped suggest some photographic stuff for me. And so my wife was an absolute essential component of me getting this book done, too. Plus, with the little stick to get it done, After 4 years, let's get it done, But anyway, that tree is now the state champion pecan tree. And yes, we did collect some pecan nuts underneath that tree. Another marvelous tree, and she's in the picture here, little red, is person. You see, you put a person beside some of these big trees and they look kind of small. And that's because the trees are awfully big. And my wife has stood beside this tree. It is a northern red oak, which is our typical red oak. What most people around here say a red oak is usually the northern red oak. But this tree was another one of these stunning trees. The lady that owned the land was so proud of this tree. She said, before my husband died, he wanted to be sure that this tree was well taken care of. And she promised that she would take good care of it with her sons, and they are. And it's near Princeton, Indiana, so down in Gibson County. But marvelous, marvelous specimen. Don't want to click this too many times. I'll go too fast and miss something. I don't think I clicked it off. There we go. Pig nut hickory on the left. You ever heard of a pig nut hickory before?
Yeah.
Few of us.
Had one.
Few.
80 feet tall at our house.
Awesome.
Carroll. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yes. Pig nut's a very fantastic tree. It's one of the hickories. I mean, a lot of people just say a hickory tree, around here. Most of those are shagbark hickory around here that we commonly call, with the big shaggy bark. But a pig nut has a tighter bark. It's part of a group called the tight bark hickories. Bitter nut and pig nut are kind of characteristic, and red hickory are characteristic of what we call a tighter bark. They don't have the big, long, scaly, shedding bark. State champion, Evansville, right near the University of Southern Indiana. It's right on their campus. Out in the woods, though, so you would never know it was there. But Sean, the guy I was just talking about before, he took me out there, my wife and I, and we got a picture of it. Then on the right is a buckeye tree. You heard of buckeyes before? Well, of course, we've all heard of buckeye trees. And the good luck and the Ohio buckeye.
Is that the state tree of Ohio?
I think it probably is. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Named after, of course, the state. But had trouble finding this tree, as the book tells a story about this. We could not find it, but the owner, he came by. It was a private land again. And he came by, and he said, I had permission to go. He said, did you find it? And I said, no, we couldn't find it. Well, I'll take you over to it. So we finally found this Ohio buckeye, and boy, it was a majestic tree itself too, straight up. A lot of buckeyes around here stay kind of short and squatty and stubby, and you just never pay too much attention to them. But this one was different. He looked different even too. And then the next picture over here is a red hickory. And red hickory is one of those species that's kind of unknown to a lot of people. They confuse it oftentimes with pignut, and sometimes it's just called a variety of pignut. But it's got its own Latin name to it, so it's separated by many people into its own separate species. But that's the state champion right there. And that's once again in Vanderburgh County in Evansville area. Evansville, Vanderburgh County have more state champion trees than any other county. It's loaded with them. And I was fortunate enough to have this nice, fantastic guy who became good friends, and he took me around to many of these. Same thing over here with the sweet gum. The sweet gum tree, you see a lot of these around. Charlie Walker's trees are the sweet gum trees, but you won't see any of Charlie's trees quite this big yet here. And the gumballs are, they're a pain, but this sweet gum tree is a state champion. He was a majestic specimen, my heavens, for a sweet gum tree. I didn't worry about the sweet gum balls so much. I was just interested in how big this thing was. So this is in Weisselmann Woods. That's in Evansville too. If you've not been to Weisselmann Woods Park before, you need to go. Take a day trip to Evansville and visit Weisselmann Woods Nature Preserve.
Looks like a pawpaw tree growing underneath it.
That was rich pawpaw country right in there, yeah. Pawpaws are usually indicative of rich soils and prolific growth ability, so you're exactly right. Boy, it did that again. Doubled up on me, didn't it? All right, let's look at Calvert Porter Woods. Here's a quiz. Can you find a person? There's a tiny person. There's one. Just one in there. That's my tiny wife, huh? She's relatively so.
Play music while you look at your trees?
No, neither one of us sang. We just listened to the birds sing. Sycamore. Sycamore is one of our grandest trees, one of my favorites. And this one was a monster. He was a great, huge thing. Calvert Porter Woods is in Montgomery County. And that county has several really wonderful trees in it too. Shades State Park is in Montgomery County. Turkey Run, which is close by, is across the line in Park County, but they're very close parks, and neither are too far from Calvert Porter Woods. This is a old growth forest. Now, this section of trees here that you see are in old growth forests. They haven't changed in 200 years. If your wagon had come through here with a horse and a cow being pulled behind and loaded with old furniture, 200 years ago you would see the same thing as you see now. The trees are old, and people say, well, were these trees there then? Yeah, they were small then. But what was behind them? More trees like this, because they had to come from something, and those big old trees were there too. So this tree's father or mother tree was probably there even when it was small. There were other big trees there like this too. So we're kind of seeing a continuous pattern here. Second picture, Purdue University owns this place. It's a research area near Farmland, Indiana, which is in Randolph County. And the color of the woods in the fall was so spectacular. And my friend Gary Potts took this picture of my wife there looking up at the trees. So that was a beautiful fall day.
Where is she in that picture? Blue, okay. Thought so.
How do those trees propagate? They don't have seeds
Yeah, they all do.
from the roots?
Well, mostly from seed. Yeah, mostly. If you cut trees down, sometimes they'll root sprout from the roots, yes. And some trees, oak is a very good regenerative tree from root sprouting, yes. Even after they're cut, sometimes they will come back from root sprouts. But primarily from the acorn production. Yeah. Picture on the right. It's a hidden nature preserve. It's a part of the old growth forest. It's in Ripley County near Versailles, and had trouble finding this because it was on old maps but not on current maps. And I asked people at Versailles State Park, I said, well, where is this tree? Well, where's that nature preserve? Where's the old growth forest? They didn't know. If they said, let's go get so-and-so in the back here. He's been here a long time. So they had this fine gentleman come up and he said, I haven't had that question asked where this place is for a long period of time. Let me show you on the map how to get there. And so my wife and I patiently drove down to the very southern edge of Versailles State Park. We parked in a driveway by a nice gentleman's house and asked if we could go over to see the old growth woods over there. And he said, didn't know there was one. I said, well, it's on the maps as being an old growth forest, never was cut. Oh, well, I've never been back over there to see that. So, but you're welcome to wander over there across the soybean field. And so we got over there and there's a huge amount of forest and we couldn't figure out, well, where is it really at? And all of a sudden there was a wood thrush calling. The beautiful trills of the wood thrush. They like old growth forests. They like old trees, and that's part of their habitat. My wife said, let's follow where he goes. And we followed the trill of the wood thrush, and he took us right to the old beech forest. And this is, as you can see, big, huge beech trees. And so this was a special place and a special find, since very few people have ever been there. Another one of our nature preserves, and which is close by. It did it again. Oh, I'll have to get after this thing. There you go. Okay. Close by, Donaldsons Woods Nature Preserve. We've all been to Donaldsons Woods. It is an old growth forest. It's famous across the country, and it's just a marvelous place to be. And so you can't go wrong by running down to Donaldsons Woods any season of the year. I'm leading a hike there April 30th to talk about this old growth forest and to walk people through the old growth forest. We're going to measure the trees and see how big they are, and we're going to talk about the trees and about old George Donaldson, who helped protect this area from any timbering at all. The old Scotsman. So he'll be talked about, and we'll take a hike through the Donaldsons Woods. Another place that's very special to my wife and me is Meltzer Woods up by Shelbyville. And it's another old growth forest that had been in the family for 100 years and had never been cut. And the old guy that owned it said, this bur oak back here is one of the biggest bur oaks, and it goes on even higher, one of the biggest bur oak trees that you'll ever see in Indiana, and it was indeed a gigantic big bur oak there too. Not quite as big as the state and national champion one, but awfully impressive. So Meltzer Woods is a state nature preserve and a designated national nature reserve. So it's significant on national records too. Imagine a couple hundred years ago coming into here and being just super impressed with the beauty. To us, we can look at it in terms of beauty. To them, the early settlers, this was continuous for so far that they all looked like this. And it was nothing so special that it is today to us, because we don't see these things very much. But Hoot Woods is in Owen County, not too far. It is now owned by the Sycamore Land Trust and protected forever. And it was originally preserved by the Nature Conservancy and then transferred to Sycamore Land Trust. The family that moved here in 1860 bought 160 acres of land, and they farmed a lot of it, but left this section without cutting it. And so today we can appreciate what it looked like to them in 1860, just like this.
That looks like very early spring with the wildflowers.
Yes, it was early spring.
And new growth.
Yes, it was.
It advanced.
Yep, I saw that, and I'm going to correct that. Okay, close by again, Pioneer Mothers Memorial Forest in Paoli. So it's close by. It had some of the largest walnut trees in the nation. Indiana was renowned as being one of the most prolific hardwood forest states in the nation. Very famous for its hardwoods 100 years ago. And Pioneer Mothers still remains down here that we can walk through a nice nature trail and see the beauty. These are worth some money. Walnut is worth some money. So by those old people not cutting, of course they didn't get the money for the wood. But now we're very glad that some of these places are preserved. Schrader Weaver Woods is close to Connorsville, and this is one of my very favorite places too. It has a virgin timber forest. It's not been cut either. The old family that moved there back in the 1850s, once again, they and their children never cut it. It finally passed to grandchildren, and they never cut it either, and they transferred it to the state of Indiana, and it is now an official state nature preserve. Another wonderful place over here called Hall Woods, once again, Montgomery County, up close to Big Walnut Creek, and protected, preserved by the Nature Conservancy, and today it still remains a stunning place to take a hike. These places do have trails, and so you can walk through them and appreciate and enjoy them. They're still there for us.
Montgomery County, what town is it?
Crawfordsville.
Crawfordsville area. Mm-hmm. And in Weisselmann Woods in Evansville, 200 acres. It's a park in Evansville, 200 acres in an urban metropolitan setting. It's the only one in the nation that's this size of a protected old growth forest within an urban setting. So it's a must see. It's a really great place. My wife and I, Martha and I, struck up a great friendship with Zach, who was the naturalist at the time. And Zach said, you go back there and take all the photographs you want to. Zach knows the book is out now, and they're buying copies for their gift shop. And Zach was promoted to the actual park director now, so he actually moved up. He's not only a naturalist, but he is a director now too. Both pictures are Weisselmann. And
These 10K walks, and there was a 10K walk in Weisselmann.
was there? Did you go?
Yeah.
Oh,
Several times.
oh, that's great. Yeah, then you've been there.
But now I want to go look at the trees one.
Right. Turkey Run on the left. It's called Rocky Hollow Falls Canyon Nature Preserve. It's official in the Indiana State Nature Preserve. Turkey Run was our first state park back in 1916. It and McCormick's Creek were dedicated state parks the first that year in 1916, 100 years exactly after our state's statehood. And this place looked like it at our statehood. So if we had been there then, we would have seen the same sort of setting. This area is very famous for its huge tulip trees. It's the Indiana State tree once again. So my wife took this picture of me by the, see here if I get the right thing on here, you can see I stand out in the red coat. Sometimes I like to wear the red coat for a contrast so you can actually see where a person is. I think I hit the wrong button a second. Let's go back up here. Aha. Hold on here. I want to be sure I'm going in the right direction. Yeah, okay. And the one on the right, before I go forward, Tribbett's Woods over in Jennings County once again. It's over by DuPont in Jennings County. And Tribbett's Woods is an old growth forest that was owned by the same family for 100 years. And the old grandma and grandpa did not want this woods ever cut. And it passed to their children, and they carried with the tradition. It was finally saved by the Nature Conservancy once again. And Oak Heritage Conservancy now manages the land. It's a state nature preserve and a grand, grand place too. Jennings County is not too far away from us either. The next thing that I mentioned previously was the odd things of trees, or why are they unique? The one on the left is obviously something that looks funny with it. Have you ever seen this before? Some people have never noticed the red bark syndrome on sycamore. It's not very common. Most sycamores look pretty much like the standard sycamore. But this has a syndrome on it. We're not sure if it's fungal, algal, or a combination of such. I tend to lean towards a fungal attack on the tree. It's not fatal or anything like that, but it discolors the bark, the exterior bark. So it's almost like a powdery mildew or fungus that affects that bark color. So it's unique. Middle tree, the deem oak. It's a cross between white oak and chinkapin oak. So oaks are very, very, as one gentleman said, he said the oaks are quite promiscuous. The pollen from one species can actually interact with the pollen of the other, and therefore they can actually hybridize and make a combination sort of tree. The deem oak is named after our first state forester, Charlie Deem, who back 100 years ago was the first forester, but he found this tree and had it, he said, this is odd, it's different, and so it was classified as, yes, it's a hybrid oak tree. And named
from Bluffton, Indiana, where I grew up.
Yes, you exactly.
I always drive by this deem oak, and Mother would say, now there's the deem oak. Now there's a fence around it now, which is
Yep.
that down.
Yeah, you see the fence down
I've
around.
always heard about the deem oak.
Yep, the deem oak is still there. And so it was a fantastic tree to be able to see. The right-hand tree is a burl on the bottom of black oak. It's down here near Mitchell on Gary Mundy's property, and it has a very, very swollen base to it. A lot of times you see these burls and cankers on oak, and this really took off in the base of this black oak here. So it's quite unusual. The viral or fungal or kind of a combination. Trees have viruses too. So
We had a farm near Silverville, and it bordered on Crate, and it had this great big spring in the bottom of a sinkhole, and all the trees around it had all those kind of,
yeah,
and it just always looked so strange.
some of them grow high up on the tree, on the limbs, and on the stem, 20, 30 feet up. Some grow basal, and just so this was unusual. The one on the left is obviously different. We call it the spooky tree. It's a white oak. So you can imagine almost face and horns and all kinds of stuff on here. Very unusual tree. Met a guy at Camp Atterbury who took us over to this tree. He was the district forester for Camp Atterbury, and he took us to this tree and said, "You won't see another one like this anywhere." Well, we didn't ever see anything quite like that one before. So he was different. It was a white oak. Sometimes when trees get very big or very odd looking, it's hard to tell which species they were originally.
So pretty without the leaves, isn't it?
Yes.
It's beautiful.
One in the middle is what I call the barber pole tree. I've actually checked barber pole tree. For those of us who remember what barber poles used to look like. It's a tulip tree. It's in Schrader Weaver Nature Preserve up there near Connorsville. And there are several trees that do this, but we're not exactly sure. Some people say vines wrapped around and caused this. Some people say it was deformed by viruses or something that affected interior in the bark. They weren't sure. And so I've not had a really definitive explanation for what conclusively this is. One on the right is two people, friends of mine. They posed for what they call the picture frame tree. Beech tree, young beech tree in near Bloomington at Griffey Woods Nature Preserve up there. So it's close by. But they loved this tree and they wanted to show it to me. And then I have the section in the book I spoke about earlier called the Just Beautiful section, The Trees of Beauty. And just you can't say much more than beautiful tree. The one on the right, the left, sorry, there's two people there. Myself and the owner, Mike Scherschel, down near Williams, or well, actually Coxton Road. It's a tulip. One of the most beautiful tulips I've ever seen. It's a fantastic tree. And Mike and his wife become good friends, and I wanted to honor them with this tree. The tree on the right, who knows what kind this is? Whoa. Let me go backwards one here first, if I can. It is doing the funniest things to me. Don't think I'm too far from the... Yeah, there it is. Who knows what kind that is? I won't touch this at all. Sassafras. Sassafras in snow. That's on my property.
That's big bark, doesn't it?
Yes, unique, big, deeply ridged bark.
Those Churchills have a big lot of bluebonnets on there.
Yes, you were there on the wildflower hike with me a long time ago too.
They're gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. Who knows what kind these are? Anyone?
Cypress.
Yes,
What'd you say?
Trudy's right. Cypress. Muscatatuck National Wildlife Refuge.
Are they in the water actually?
Yeah, they come and go as far as water levels rise and fall in Muscatatuck. Sometimes these kind of have dry feet around them. You can actually approach the tree, and a lot of the time they are in shallow water, yeah.
But that doesn't hurt them, right?
That's what,
That doesn't hurt cypress?
no, they love that.
We have several on IU campus too.
Yes,
Nice.
yes, IU campus does have some. A lot of those were, of course, planted. The most beautiful cypress swamp area is down in Posey County, once again down there by the Ohio River.
And you saw this live?
There's what?
You took this picture? You took this picture?
Oh, yeah,
You saw it looking like,
yeah,
that looks like watercolors.
yeah.
Really, you could make a living selling some of these pictures.
But could I keep up with inflation the way it's going? I don't know. Then People and Trees would do a little quickie on that. Some friends of ours have a maple syrup production little place over here. That's Richard Brock's place, Dave, over here on Williams area. And they do maples. And then children love to climb trees. I just wanted to show a picture of children using trees. You probably climbed when you were little too, and I did. My grandson swinging from my big oak tree.
Yeah, it's perfect for so different from the home, right? Parallel to the.
Oh my goodness, what is that on the left?
You just got down from farming it, didn't you? Look at the children up in this tree.
What
This
kind of tree is this?
silver maple. Now the new state champion. Located in Williams. Williams. Has 2 state champion trees right in Williams.
In Williams again?
Yeah. Over the years, I've nominated 7 state champion trees. Many of them were in Lawrence County. They've been succeeded by others that outdid them, or mine died and they had to replace. But this is currently there, and it's 10 feet across. I can't reach this far across. So it's a giant. And we teach children about trees early, let them learn about leaves and identify trees and the bark of trees. This is how we pass the generation on. This is what my father did with me. This is what I'm doing with my grandson here. And he's very much into trees. So we hope to pass that on.
Is that tree on the left still healthy?
It's lost some branches, but it's still fairly healthy. It's fairly. Trees are important to people for reasons of practicality too, not just beauty and make you just go walk and enjoy, but also our hardwoods industry in Indiana is very dependent on trees. And so I visited a factory that actually used wood production here and was doing a tremendous amount of work with wooden trim. This is Cutters down near Borden, actually down in that area. And then the gentleman on the right is an Amish gentleman, friend of mine now. We've become good friends over the years. Richard Graber and his cabinet business down near Odin. So trees are very important for things that we take for granted, that we need all the time too. Cannot forget not only the beauty, but the use. And then I come to the closure of my book with my final picture and then my statement here. And then there's silence in the old woods. The aged monstrous trees, the fallen mossy logs finding their way back into the lush deep soil. Red-headed woodpeckers working their shift, squirrels cutting hickory nuts, and salamanders scurrying underneath the log on which you are sitting. Only the wind speaks through far up leafy canopy. Here is the place we meditate, that which has existed far before this day, but yet the place so dearly needed today. The Indiana of the past can still be with us, and the Indiana of the future is yet to come. Our glorious trees, the silent workers, may we care for them as they have served us so long.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. Any questions we can have? Any questions?
Hear it again.
So did you get a lot of poison ivy?
Tried to avoid it as much as possible, but a little bit. There's one place called Kramer's Old Growth Woods near Rockport, Indiana, down in Ohio. He did. Well, Kramer's Old Woods is just north and a little bit to the west of downtown Rockport. They had the most poison ivy of any place I've ever seen. But we were able to avoid it by picking the seasons of the year and trying to go through it at that point. But it had beautiful trees, and that's in the book there too. Mm-hmm.
There's that sycamore, I assume it's still there, I haven't been there for a while, that's just off to the west of R Street. There's a.
Yeah, by the church there, just
Yeah,
about the Free
yes,
Methodist.
yeah.
Still there.
How does that compare?
You know, I never did go back and measure it. I've seen it for years and years and years, and we attend the Free Methodist Church, and so we see it every time we come out to the parking lot. But it's big, but it's, somebody said they had measured it, and it wasn't as big as like the state champion trees or anything. So the state champion sycamore is up in, well, it's north of Brown County up. Trafalgar, if you know where Trafalgar is in Morgan County, it's up there. It's a state champion, and it's 8 feet across,
Fantastic.
which is awfully big.
I thought sycamores didn't get big because they were hollow in the middle. Is that not true?
Both. They get big and they're hollow in the middle.
They're always hollow.
Well, they usually always will hollow out. Sycamore used to be our biggest tree in Indiana. In the book, it talks about a sycamore that was, how many, 20 feet across or so in here? It was so hollow they could put a horse and buggy in there. Yeah, sycamores used to grow. They were probably our very biggest tree in Indiana. Mm-hmm.
You just can't imagine what people saw when they came here and saw these trees. You know, we were in northwestern Canada one time when Douglas, there was a forest there that David Douglas named, huge trees. And I said to our friends, well, why did he do that? He said, because when he came from Europe, the trees were all gone.
I know.
You know, so think of what they saw
Mm-hmm.
when they came to America.
Mm-hmm.
You know, really.
It was a challenge, but also they met the challenge by cutting most of it for farmland and everything. So they met the challenge.
Are state record trees, are they protected by law if they're a designated state record tree?
No.
No?
If they're on private land, you can do with it what you want. But most people are so proud of having that tree that they would never dare to cut it. I called one gentleman on the phone and I said, I'd like to come down and take a picture of your state record tree. And it got real silent. And he said, his voice was broken, and he said, that tree had just been cut down last week. He said, it was dead and it was going to fall down, and I had to take it down. He said, I couldn't watch. I was crying too much to watch them cut it out the window. So he hated that his old tree had come down. But eventually they do. Eventually
all the trees, all of them died
eventually. Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say about the old trees in the Mark Churchill property up here on 14th and M Street?
They're big too.
They're what?
They're big.
Are they at least 200 years old?
I would say probably some of them are.
They look like
Mm-hmm.
they need to come
Or
down.
100 to 150. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they get to a certain age in an urban neighborhood area, sometimes they just have to be taken down. Now, Sue?
Yeah, what caused Charlie Walker to pick gum tree as the seeds that he took into space?
From what I got, in fact, Charlie's going to be here May the 7th. I'll run that by him again. I think that was selected through Purdue, since Charlie, of course, was a Purdue grad. I think he got recommendations through forestry at Purdue of what would be the best to take and would propagate the easiest. So I don't think Charlie just sat here and said, I'm going to take this and this. He worked, I think, with the guys up at Purdue. And Charlie will be here May the 7th. We're having a book signing, this book. If people haven't not bought the book online, you can buy it online, and then they can bring it May 7th and I will sign. I have a few copies of the book here tonight that I can sell. I have a limited copies, but most of them are sold on Amazon or through Purdue Press that can be ordered there. And then right here, they've graciously said we can have a book signing here. Gary Potts, that worked with me on the book, Charlie Walker will be here, and we all three grew up together in the same neighborhood, and we're still close, and we're all going to be here together on May 7th. So, here at the museum, right here. Same room.
Derby Day.
Talking about Purdue and all your connections, and tell me about Purdue number 1, the walnut. Are you familiar with that? When I was up there, that's the walnut tree that they used to start all these walnut
Yeah.
farms. Is it really was it really a discovery of this walnut tree?
It was a selected, I guess, many candidate trees showing superior growth, form, production, longevity, and resistance to any kind of diseases. They selected one down, I think, to start that designation as Walnut 1. There are many that are candidates that have superior genetic properties, and then those are propagated out in nurseries, and you can actually buy prodigy from some of those select trees and plant. Mm-hmm.
And very productive.
Mm-hmm. Very productive. Yeah, Bob?
Yeah, Carol, this is kind of off the topic of big trees, but I know you're really into the regeneration of chestnut, getting it back. Can you talk just a couple of minutes and tell the folks what you're doing with that?
Yes, the Indiana chapter of the American Chestnut Foundation is trying to bring back some of the chestnut trees. Chestnut used to be one of the most dominant species in eastern North America. Extremely valuable tree, grew to tremendous sizes, 10, 20 feet across once again, succumbed to a blight, and chestnut blight wiped out all the chestnut trees. They start again from root sprouts, but they never get big because this parasite plant, Cryptophaneria parasitica, gets into their systems and kills them. But what American Chestnut Foundation is trying to do is establish a hybrid, a tree that has got characteristics of the Chinese chestnut in it, very small characteristics of that, but primarily American chestnut, and that will be resistant, hopefully, to the blight. So that's what we're doing with the Indiana chapter, is planting some of these trees that come from the national organization that's working with them.
Yeah, they're down, was it 1/16 Chinese and 15/16 American?
Correct.
It's like an American chestnut, except it's got that resistance to the disease in it.
Yeah, the leaf looks very typical to the American chestnut. We're trying to get the characteristics true to American chestnut. But Chinese chestnut, which was imported into this country a century ago, has the resistance. And so we're blending in that resistance to the American chestnut and trying to get it reestablished.
Isn't there one at the Leahy Nursery?
Yeah, that's what I was
I don't know.
I think
pretty big.
it's a very large one.
It's
Yeah, pretty big.
Chinese chestnut, probably.
No.
Probably. Probably. The true American chestnut, there are a few around that have grown to maturity and escaped to blight. The state champion is in my book too. It's in Roselawn, Indiana, which is in Newton County, up by the lake. And it's about this big across. And it's escaped to blight so far. And so it's a true American. So we're proud of having one in Indiana that's still hanging on there. Mm-hmm. And who else? Dave?
Hey, what about the elm trees?
Yeah. Poor old elm trees too.
You know,
Yeah.
those two trees down there at Cecil Margaret Armstrong's,
Yeah.
I cut them.
Yeah.
They were huge.
Yeah, I remember you cut them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they're fantastic tree. I've got a large white elm, or called American elm. I've got one about this big on my property. It's still hanging on there. Elms got this disease also brought in 1930 from, it's called Dutch elm disease, and it just nails them. Red elm, or slippery elm as they call it, it's like a cousin to the American elm. It resists a lot more to the blight, but eventually sometimes it succumbs to it too. The state champion red elm was in Franklin, Indiana. It was a big, beautiful tree. It's in my book too, because I was obviously visited the thing. And I heard a month ago that a windstorm had blown it down. I mean, this tree, it had that typical elm look, you know. It's a great tree. And then a shingle oak in Evansville, these people were so proud of it. A year ago, the city came in and had to do some road work. They cut into some root system of it or something. It was not too far from the road. And the bank collapsed and the tree fell over. And these people were destroyed. It was a state champion shingle oak tree. And I'm probably the only guy that's got remaining pictures of that in the book. And I told Sean, I said, hey, Sean, when this book comes out, if you'll split the cost with me, we're going to donate a book to those folks because the shingle oak's in there and they love their tree so much. He said, I'd be honored to present this to them. So he took the book over and gave it to the folks that had the shingle oak tree, which is in the book. So you never know. They come and go.
The
Bob?
bur oak tree that you mentioned in Posey County, is that the oldest tree period in Indiana, or is there an older tree?
Well, it's probably that one probably is. There's a tree up in Schrader Weaver which I photographed also, it's in the books, 300 years old. But they think that this old burr is at least 450 years old. And that's about as much as they get in Indiana. Mm-hmm.
What can you say about the mimosa tree?
Don't plant them.
We had one in our neighborhood, they finally took it down.
It's pretty. It's a great pollinator for bees. Bees love it. The hummingbirds love it too. But it spreads. It can spread. Now, I've got several on my place, and I've had to cut several out. So it's a propagator, self-propagator, and it's on our list of should not do if possible. A lot of a lot of these Bradford pears and all these calorie pears and Bradford pears are beautiful, but bad news, really bad news. They spread along the highway corridors. You can see them all the way everywhere, and they're an invasive tree. They got away. They weren't supposed to get away, but they got away because they cross-pollinated with another one, another subspecies that they weren't supposed to. Neither one of them was supposed to do anything, but once they finally got the pollen crossed, it became live, and now it's reseeds. And that's not good either.
Could you explain to us how you know the age of a tree by not cutting it down or counting the rings as we do? I'm not familiar with what you do there.
Yeah, we're going to do that on the April 30th hike at Donaldsons Woods in Spring Mill too. Talk about that. But the three primary ways, cut it down. Count the rings like we did with kids, But that's a no-no unless it has to come down. Now, if a tree has come down, has fallen and broken off, you can do a nice cross cut. We could have Dave come out and do you a nice flat cut across there, and you could use a fresh exposure and count the rings. You can do that, or you can use an increment borer, which is a little tube that you can bore into the center of the tree, pull it out, extracts a little bark, a tree core sample out of there. Does not kill the tree, but brings out a little core, and then you can count the lines on there, and that's the equal to. So professional dendrologists will do that, but it's not recommended. It can introduce fungi, bacteria, and stuff into the tree, but usually they wax seal it or something so that cannot enter. But so it's not very often done. And another referential thing that you can tell age of a tree is perhaps an old photograph that has it in a very young stage, and then you could sort of extrapolate on to current times about how old that is. But that's primarily the way. Mm-hmm.
If you take the sap out of a maple tree in order to make maple syrup, does that hurt the
Doesn't
tree?
hurt? No, doesn't hurt the tree.
What happens if you leave it in there?
Leave what, the bore or the tap in there?
Mm-hmm.
I never heard of anybody leaving the tap in after.
If you leave the sap, if you don't take it out, would the tree be stronger if you left the sap in?
No, they do just fine with drawing the sap out. They replenish that. They replenish that just fine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want to overdo and put 25 taps in one tree probably or anything, but they do fine. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll stop then, and appreciate you guys. And if anybody does want a copy of the book, they are $34.99, and they're also available through Purdue Press. They're also available through Amazon, and like I said, there will be a book signing May 7th, and I'll have some more copies here then too.
What is your hike? You mentioned it a couple times. What time is that on April 30th?
1 p.m. at the Donaldsons Woods, which is also the Twin Caves parking lot.
Will you go off trail?
No, we'll probably stay on trail mostly. Yeah. We're going to do some activities there, determining some circumferences, diameters, tree height. We're going to determine what the index is for the tree. How does it become a state champion tree if it has certain numbers and index and stuff. And we talk about aging the trees.
Where is that again?
You know where the Twin Caves parking lot is at Spring Mill?
Do you know Spring Mill?
You come in and you turn right. Once you get past the gate and stuff, you go down a few blocks and it's to the right towards what was the old the swimming pool. Then you take another right to Twin Caves. It's all marked. Yeah, you'll find it.
Recently.
Yeah, California. Yeah, just was in Redwood Country last year. Mm-hmm.
You know, we visited one time the Bristol Pine Forest in eastern California. And
Yeah.
They would not tell you where the oldest tree was.
No.
Why? Well, because they didn't want people to take a piece of it or something. I mean, there were a lot of trees. Were you there, Kay, too? Did you do that Bristol Pine Forest?
Well, I've been there, but I don't think I was with you.
No, not much. I think we went.
It was guarded.
They wouldn't say, I mean, there were a lot
Uh-huh.
of big ones, but they
Yeah.
said, we're not going to tell you where the biggest one was.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's an Inyo National Forest up in Sierra Nevada. Mm-hmm.
So in the listings, do they tell you where all the
My book
trees
doesn't tell you where any private ones are. It'll tell you the county or near Princeton, Indiana or something. But to honor people's privacy, it has these trees, some of which are right by the house or they're by the barn or something. They don't want just everybody wandering. But everything else, state nature preserves, is findable in my book, and it's findable on Google, and most of the stuff's findable on Google, Googling it.
Did the state registry tell you where they were?
Yeah, I had some private access to get to some of those, only with owner permission ahead of time. You know, it's all done with owner permission, of course. But the pride was obvious when I wanted to do it, so it was no problem. People were really fantastic people. Okay, well, thank you very much.